The Huns, a symbol of fear and terror, and their king Attila.
Many legends and sagas feature the funeral of Attila.
To this day, his death is shrouded in mystery.
They try to hide the tomb.
Hungarian scientists are searching for the legendary tomb. They make fascinating discoveries and are getting closer and closer to the Huns.
I'm standing on the wall of Attila's castle.
Will they uncover the secret of the Hun king?
Unbelievable.
Where's Attila's tomb? The great myths of mankind. Mysteries passed on over thousands of years. Inexplicable events, places shrouded in legend, and superhuman heroes. Even scientists are fascinated. Is there any truth to these ancient legends? Researchers across the globe are working hard to solve the greatest mysteries of our time. The Hungarian steppe, home of the Huns in the 5th century. From here, they set out to plunder and conquer. Ghost riders attacking out of nowhere, forcing entire tribes to flee. Their greatest leader, Attila, the king of the Huns. Who is this legendary ruler responsible for instilling fear across Europe? Adam Baumgartner is fascinated by the myths surrounding the Huns. He heads a group south of Budapest that examines ancient combat techniques. Equipped with horses, armor, and weapons, they dive deep into the history of the Huns.
The most fascinating thing about the Huns is that they came from nowhere. They fought with both Roman empires, defeating one of them. And they also wanted to recreate this beautiful period of history, to recreate the Hunnic lifestyle.
To the group, there's more to it than just the folklore. Armor, clothes, weapons, and combat techniques. They want everything to be as true to detail as possible. Attila has become a cult legend to many Hungarians. Nobody knows exactly what the Hun king looked like. His people didn't leave behind written documents. Only his enemies write about him. And so Attila is remembered mainly as one thing: the Scourge of God, the incarnation of the devil spreading doom and disaster across the world.
Psychological warfare works on the basis that we are hugely intelligent cognitive beings with very, very strong imaginations, which means that imagination and our emotions can be manipulated. It works because it takes some of our attention away from the battlefield. It was in the Huns' favour to be feared because it meant that some of the battle had already been won even before the actual battle commenced.
In the West, in the 4th century CE, the Huns appear on the world stage for the first time. As part of bloody campaigns, martial horsemen advance deep into the heart of Europe. Their greatest enemies are the Romans, still ruling over half the continent. But the empire struggles to fend off the quick advances of these new opponents. The Huns overrun and raid vast stretches of land. In the 4th century, the Roman Empire is divided into two separate empires, one in the west and one in the east. After subjecting a large number of Goths to their rule, the Huns move on to Roman legions.
We don't know exactly why the Huns started to move. Perhaps it was climate change, perhaps they were searching for new fertile land for their growing numbers of horsemen. But we are certain that when they started to move, they pushed in front of them tens of thousands of people, and they fought those tribes as well, pushing them up against the walls of the Roman Empire.
Scientists still debate the origins of the Huns to this day. The only thing they agree on is that they came from the huge Asian steppe, nomads living off husbandry and hunting. Their departure to the west is closely tied to one name: Attila, born around 400 CE. In the 5th century, he and his allies took regions by storm. To this very day, Hungarians celebrate him as their national hero.
Myths tend to get exaggerated over time because they come from an oral tradition, which means that each retelling is different. Further, many of them were performed, so to hold the audience's attention, it's important to make them as entertaining as possible. The heroic become more heroic, the magic becomes more magical, and the power becomes more powerful.
His death is shrouded in legends, helping to solidify his mythical image. To this day, nobody knows how and where he was buried. His dead body is said to be protected by 3 layers of iron, silver, and gold. Allegedly, Attila's followers cut off their hair and wounded their faces to mourn his death, with blood in place of tears. Legend has it that the men who dug the pit were then killed to ensure the tomb would forever remain undiscovered.
The practical answer for why the undertaking slaves were killed is that they didn't want anybody to find the treasure or find the tomb. But the more religious reason might be that he wanted to take these people with him. This was a common motif. This happened all over the world, where fallen kings would want to leave with their servants.
Most experts believe Attila was buried in Hungary, in an undisclosed location near the Danube. The search for the legendary location inspires researchers and hobby treasure hunters alike. Time and time again, someone claims to have found him, but they are never right. Musician Leventi Seregni has been looking for traces of Attila and the Huns for quite some time. He's on his way to an excavation site in the Polish mountains.
No, we are going to hell. No.
His search for the Hun treasures is financed with private means. He has had a decade-long fascination with Attila and a brilliant career as a rock star. In Hungary, since the 1960s, Leventi Seregni has been as famous as John Lennon.
Fejükre is állhatnának, érdekelni nem tudnának ők. Bár tudnám hova, de hova, de hova.
Today, he's visiting the place where he believes he'll find traces of the Huns, the Moonshine Quarry. Here, Leventi Seregni and his excavation team have unearthed several treasures from the Hun era. Any new discovery could bring him one step closer to Attila. Leventi Seregni thinks the Huns used the area as a burial site, and he's hoping to find clues leading to the legendary Hun king.
This used to be a Roman quarry. When the Huns arrived, they changed everything, but nobody knows why.
Recently, the team has found some bones dating back 1,500 years. A first clue as to how the Huns might have used this former quarry.
Researchers have found a complete skeleton beneath this rock. It belonged to a cow. They discovered more bones deeper down, a human skeleton. This is a typical pagan burial ritual.
Úgymond pogány temetkezési stílus.
The place seems to be a sacred site to the Huns. Could Attila's tomb be close? Leventi Sereni and his team will continue their search in a few months. If Attila's tomb was to be found, it will probably be here in the Hungarian plain. But without any written clues, it's nearly impossible to pinpoint exactly where it could be.
Studying the Huns is very difficult indeed because they were a nomadic people, and the only way you can find out about them is to see what other peoples wrote about them when they came into contact. Other peoples like the Romans, who described the Huns in some detail.
Eastern Roman historian Priscus of Panium describes a visit with Attila.
Based on that, we know how Attila and the court looks like and how the traditions of the Huns look. So Priscus said that Attila is a very noble man and he's very simple compared to the other Hunnic lords.
Priscus presents Attila in a soft light. He showed himself temperate. His cup was made of wood, while to the guests were given goblets of gold and silver. But Attila has more than one face. He kills his brother Bleda to come into power. Both rule as kings, but Attila is only second in line. He wants to be the sole ruler and bring his brother's devotees into his own army. It remains unclear whether the fratricide really took place as recorded, or if Attila's enemies were merely attempting to slander him. But we know Attila wins the loyalty of the most important tribal chiefs. Germanic tribes also fight alongside him. Contemporaries estimate his army consists of 500,000 warriors, which is probably exaggerated. Jointly, they wage war against the Romans. Attila starts by fighting the Eastern Roman Empire. Emperor Theodosius pays dearly for peace and agrees to tribute payments. Attila goes on to turn against the Western Roman Empire. The empire of the Hun king stretches from the Caspian Sea to the Alps.
Despite what some historians would like us believe, Attila wasn't just some ruthless barbarian. He must have also possessed some fairly exceptional skills to have been able to organize a cavalry this large. He must have spoken several languages, since the Huns were people of various ethnicities. So he was knowledgeable, he was strategic, and he knew how to negotiate with other rulers.
Remains of the Huns are scattered all over Hungary. Archaeologist Gabor Wilhelm specializes in excavating antique tombs. To him, each grave is just a piece of the puzzle. Archaeological finds are crucial sources when it comes to reconstructing the history of the Huns, their spread and their wars. Starting in Central Asia, a map shows how the Huns ravaged almost all of Europe and Asia. Some finds even point to Attila himself. One particularly spectacular object is here in the Kecskemét Museum. It is a skull of a warrior whose ostentatious tomb was only discovered quite recently. This warrior lived in the first half of the 5th century, just like Attila, and he was buried in a Hun ritual.
This tomb is an important find because there are still many unanswered questions on the Huns. Thanks to written tradition, we know a few things about Attila, but finds from this era are rare. Even the smallest artifacts help us to complete this mosaic, this puzzle.
We got the skull back from the anthropologist. He pointed out that the nasal bridge is very large. This is a crucial detail. It's a typical Mongolian feature. Right after the excavation, he also said that there are traces of the upper bandage up here. We were also able to see this in the first pictures.
A very particular custom of ancient tribes is artificial cranial deformations. To elongate the skull, the Huns wrap their babies' heads in bandages while their bones are still malleable. These deformations were likely most practiced amongst aristocratic families to demonstrate their superior status.
Brilliant.
One of the most deformed skulls he's ever seen.
He must have been really handsome.
But who is this mysterious Hun warrior? The tomb is unusually exquisite. Could this be Attila himself? Bountiful burial objects could mean Attila is close. Golden jewelry, belt buckles, an iron sword. No doubt this has to be the grave of a powerful man. But one detail doesn't add up. This warrior died young. Attila, however, probably lived until he was about 50. Nevertheless, the archaeologists linked the find directly to Attila.
This young man was part of the Hun elite, so it's very likely that he knew Attila.
It is quite possible that the young warrior fought alongside Attila. As the supreme ruler of the Huns, Attila always leads his people into battle. It is not only the Huns' legendary morale that gets the Roman rulers into dire straits. Adam Baumgartner's men train with weapons of antiquity: swords, spears, arrows, and bows. The premier class, fighting on horseback like in Attila's time.
The Huns are training their whole life. They are training with different weapons. They are training to use the spears, use the bows. The bow is the basic weapon, and it is used for break up the formations of the enemies and also strike them from far away.
The Huns are coming!
The Huns are specialized in taking their opponents by surprise. Baumgartner's group is rehearsing an attack on a Roman camp.
Secret of the Hunnic warfare is that they are fighting from a running horse and they are using a very powerful bow.
The Huns retreat after every attack, only to strike again unexpectedly at a later date.
Everybody's afraid of what they don't understand, especially when it can sneak up fast and kill you at a distance. The Huns were very foreign and somewhat unknown. And not only that, they had practices of ripping their faces open when somebody died in battle as though they felt no pain. And when they rushed into war, they showed no fear. When you're thinking about having to face that kind of force, it might be really scary to think that you might not have that inside of you that you need to match it.
The Huns use a new technique to wage war. Their secret weapon is the Hun bow, which at the time was unheard of in Europe. The ancient high-tech bow is made from various materials: wood, horn, sinew, and bone, glued together in multiple layers.
Here on the inside of the bow you have the animal horn, the center has a wooden core, and on the outside there are animal sinews. Here we can see that the horn and the grip have been reinforced with bone plates.
All these features reinforce the bow while making it highly flexible. The bow is drawn further back, and its various components are able to store more energy. The composite bow used by the Huns also has a special shape.
The Huns used asymmetrical composite bows equipped with rigid horns. We can see that the lower limb is a bit shorter than the upper limb, making it much easier to move on horseback.
This type of composite bow helps Attila win. The deadly arrows are accelerated by the horse's speed, which further increases the force of their impact. The nimble composite bows allow the Hun to shoot backwards, even when galloping in the opposite direction, meaning they can weaken their enemies even in retreat mode. We want to put the impact of these ancient arrows to the test. Our target, 2 pumpkins. Our weapons, a longbow, the typical long-range weapon used in Roman times and into the Middle Ages. Next to it, the composite bow of the Huns. Bows can only be drawn right before they're shot, otherwise the force exerted at rest would be too great. Which type of weapon is more destructive? The bows are shot from the same distance, using the same type of arrow. The longbows up first.
The longbow went through.
Next up, the composite bow. It stores almost twice as much energy when drawn.
Whoa, you smashed it! Oh yeah, it's complete.
The result is clear. The arrow from the Hun bow penetrates the pumpkin almost completely.
Composite bow is the winner.
The composite bow makes the Huns the superpower of late antiquity, and their merciless warfare becomes part of collective memory. The rumors about the brutal horsemen were quite demoralizing. Their goal is to force the enemy to surrender and have frightened soldiers join their ranks, a myth that survives the centuries. The expression, "the Huns are coming," remains a symbol for calamity up until the 20th century. In 1900, German soldiers are deployed to China to thwart a rebellion. Emperor Wilhelm II gives his infamous Hun speech, asking his soldiers to show no mercy to their opponents. He wants the Chinese to fear the Germans like the world once feared Attila the Hun. Based on Wilhelm's address, the Hun becomes a new epithet for the Germans. British and American newspapers happily use this image during World War I. In World War II, Nazi propaganda tries to instrumentalize the old fear of enemy attacks from the east, comparing the Soviet army to the Huns. In December 1941, Hitler declares the Soviet Union is trying to destroy Europe as the Huns once did, and therefore to save Europe, he must invade Russia.
The Huns became a very valuable tool for later propaganda purposes, because if you needed to label a people as unpredictable, as violent, as ferocious, then you simply called them the Huns, and to do so brought with it this air of mystery, of wildness, and of violence.
The Huns, fearless and merciless warriors, an image that lives on for over 1,500 years. In another experiment, we are trying to find out from which range the weapons are effective. In battles, penetrating power isn't the only deciding factor. Reach also plays a key role. On a field near the riding arena, the men mark out 200 meters by placing a pumpkin on the ground every 20 meters. The Roman longbow is once again going head-to-head with a composite bow. At 32 meters per second, the Roman arrow covers 100 meters. What force will the composite bow unleash? The Hun arrow reaches a speed of 42 meters per second and hits the ground at 170 meters. A difference of 70 meters, a clear advantage in attacks on the Romans. With their superior long-range weapon, the Huns under Attila weaken the Roman empires in the east and the west. They advance by the thousands and break their adversaries' line of defense with a deadly rain of arrows. The Roman army is helpless. The Hun arrows decide battle after battle. The Huns are legendary because of this novel military technique. Soon every child in Europe knows Attila's name. But his death still remains a mystery to this day. Nobody knows where he was buried. Some believe Attila's tomb has to be in the riverbed of the Danube or the Tisa, one of its tributaries. The exact location, unknown. Descriptions only tell us how the burial reportedly took place. The details bear great resemblance to the funeral of Visigoth King Alaric, who ruled only a few decades before Attila. Allegedly, he is buried in a drained riverbed as well. Attila's final resting place is also meant to remain a secret forever. He is said to have been buried per request under a river in a secret ceremony. So, can we find Attila's tomb in one of the Hungarian rivers? Attila Todt is an underwater archaeologist. The Hungarian rivers are like a second home to him and his team. If Attila's grave really were to be found on the bottom of the Danube or one of its tributaries, Attila Todt would be the one to find it. From his boat, the scientist scours the riverbed for hidden objects using a side-scan sonar.
There are big trees on the water. It's a bit dangerous today not to hit a tree trunk.
Can he find Attila's tomb?
Actually, we don't know where is Attila's tomb. It is possible that under the Danube, because of course he was a very important person. His center of his empire was in the present-day Hungary somewhere. So probably they tried to hide the tomb, so it could be actually true.
Riverbeds are wonderful locations for preserving historic material. There is no air, and that means that the material can be preserved for centuries. So there's every chance that if we found the right place, then Attila's burial chamber would be preserved just perfectly.
But how could a king be buried under a river? The Danube or Tisa would have had to be dammed or drained. The Hun warriors on horseback could only have achieved this by using topographical features, with islands to shorten the dam. A natural barrier would mean the water only needs to be dammed on one side, while the other side serves as a natural drain. This way, Attila's men might be able to dig a grave that could be inundated at a later date.
We found Roman materials and far older relics along the Danube. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to find memories of the Huns, if not Attila's grave itself.
Will the underwater archaeologist track down Attila's hidden tomb?
The Danube is full of cultural remains starting from prehistory up to modern period, because this was the highway of Europe.
It's highly likely that it was crossed by a Hun army 1,500 years ago.
On the screen, we can see what is under the water. It's like a map, a flat map, of the Danube, right and left of the boat, and we see everything which is just a little bit emerging from the river bed.
Ultrasonic waves and GPS data from the boat provide researchers with images of what lies beneath the riverbed. Whatever is hidden down there, a tomb, ruins, lost treasures, will be visible on the screen. Suddenly, they discover something.
We have a very big block, maybe a piece of wall. We are just going over two walls, forming rectangular structure. Maybe, it's beautiful. I think it was a Roman tower, a big tower of fortification.
An old Roman fort on the outer imperial frontier.
So this is the position where we have to dive, and I think it's a very good location because we have no current. The depth is only 4.7 meters. Yeah, we save the position, so we dive here and look at what's under the water.
The site is promising. This is exactly where the river divided the Roman Empire from the great empire of the Huns 2,000 years ago, the Danubian Limes. The Romans built a series of forts along the stream because of the repeated clashes between Huns and Romans. Attila's looking to raid and force them into making tribute payments, a business model that submits opponents. To the Romans, it's the beginning of a long and trying war. Neither protective walls nor military equipment can shelter them from the Hun attacks. The chain mail is a typical piece of Roman armor. Used for centuries, it protects them against cut and thrust weapons. But can it also deflect Hun arrows? This group wants to put it to the test. From a 10-meter distance, the penetrating power of an arrow is deadly. The chain mail does not stop the projectile. The Huns use another kind of protection, lamella or scale armor, which can even withstand arrows. Hun leaders and tribal chiefs went into battle wearing this armor, and Attila most probably did too.
The armor is created from thin plates of lamellas made from iron. It's very light, very movable. You could raise your hand, you could use the bows. This is a very protective layer.
A test will show if the lamella armor can really protect against projectiles. Can the thin iron lamellas deflect an arrow? The arrow really bounces off. The energy spreads across the lamellas, weakening the impact. It's clear. The Hun armor provides better protection, at least against incoming arrows. It's also light and flexible, ideal for fighting high on horseback.
It went through the chains and the lamella blocked it.
Their weapons, armor, and combat techniques fuel the myth of the invincible Hun. The Hun combat technique is superior, thanks to their bowmen and horses. Together, the rider and his horse form a perfect fighting machine, nimble and fast. Contemporaries scoff at them, claiming the Huns lived their entire lives on horseback, purportedly even sleeping in the saddle and negotiating on horseback.
The Huns are training from early childhood on horseback. The speed of the horse is also giving them additional range and power.
Their horses allow the Huns to cover up to 80 kilometers per day, which makes them more than twice as fast as the Roman legions. The horseback attacks are also psychologically powerful.
They are using the blood of their enemies to warming up the horses. They put it to the nose, so they are not afraid from the smell of the blood.
Ghost riders attacking their adversaries out of the blue, lightly armed but incredibly fast and nimble. They instill fear into the hearts of Europeans. And one man embodies this terror like no other. Attila, almost superhuman, invincible. At the peak of his power in 451, Attila attacks Roman cities in Gaul, culminating in a decisive battle of the Catalonian plains. 40,000 Roman warriors against 45,000 Huns and their devotees. In ancient times, it's the battle of the nations. The Roman troops managed to push back and surround Attila. It's a stalemate. For the very first time, the dreaded Hun king is forced to admit defeat. Attila loses his reputation for being invincible. The following year, he invades Italy, but can't conquer Rome. In 453, Germanic Princess Ildiko arrives at Attila's court. He marries her, and the Huns celebrate all night. But in the morning, there is silence, the legend goes. An attendant finds Attila dead in his bed next to his wife. He is said to have choked on his own blood, maybe in a drunken stupor. Or did Ildiko kill him?
So, was he poisoned? Did he die in his sleep? There certainly would have been motivations to tell a different story if he did die in his sleep. One, warrior cultures tend to prioritize warrior deaths. So to die of a murder would have been much better than to die in your sleep. And at the same time, people want to blame somebody when something bad happens. And so you can imagine that when you walk in and you find your king dead and a woman cowering there, it would have been easy to have blamed her whether she did it or not.
Attila's death is just as mysterious as the circumstances of his funeral, shrouded in ancient myths. The version of the story in which Attila is buried in a river makes it into the Hungarian history books. But the tomb still hasn't been found to this very day. Does it lie on the bottom of the Danube or Tisza? And why is the uncertainty so tormenting?
When there are knowledge gaps that need to be filled, when we haven't been able to find out what happened to the mortal remains of a famous person like Attila, there's always room for speculation. There's no tomb we can examine, no skeletons we can look at, so there's a lot of room for imagination.
Attila Todt and his team have found the remains of a Roman fort in the Danube using a sonar device. They need special equipment for the dive.
This metal detector is a very useful device for us because the visibility is very short. I mean, 20-40 centimeters in the Danube. So when we are swimming, we are just scanning the riverbed, and it is signing every small metal object, so you can touch it and look at it if it is archaeological find or not.
Attila Todt's group is one of the most experienced teams in Hungary. They have found many remains from the Huns and Romans. Discovering Attila's tomb would fulfill their lifelong dream.
Of course, everything could be possible. So we are searching the Danube for, and the Tisa and all rivers here in the Carpathian Basin for cultural heritage.
The divers have reached the site of the former Roman fortifications. They go down to where there was once dry land. Patience and the right tools are the only way to find something in the mud. The diver passes the Roman walls, once providing protection against the Huns, diving through the murky water of the Danube. Suddenly, the metal detector starts going off. There's got to be an iron object hidden between the stones. Will the diver manage to retrieve it? A piece of iron emerges from the Danube.
Looks like a handmade ancient iron nail.
A Roman nail, not a rare sight for the archaeologists. They don't discover any Hun remains this time.
If in a day I will find an iron coffin inside a silver and gold coffin, of course, naturally, I will not throw it back to the water, but we will excavate it and investigate. Of course, everything could be possible.
Until then, the Danube shall keep the secret for herself. A great hero needs a death shrouded by myths.
To the Hungarians, Attila is like a national myth. He's become a central figure in Hungarian historiography because of his power and the way he was able to intimidate his opponents.
Maybe those wanting to find Attila's tomb have to look elsewhere. Budapest, once the heart of Europe. The once royal city of Hungary back in medieval times is now a major tourist attraction. It is also where the life work of an unknown author is stored. The Hungarians refer to him as anonymous. His oeuvre is titled the Gesta Hungarorum, the deeds of the Hungarians. The 800-year-old manuscript is kept in the National Library in Buda Castle. Historian Laszlo Veszprémy has studied it for years. It is the first depiction of Hungarian history that goes back to Attila's time. Narrations and legends that had previously been passed on orally. In Hungary, it's a valuable treasure documenting their past. And it turns out the old text really contains hidden clues about Attila's tomb.
This is one of the most valuable manuscripts of the National Library, written by Anonymous, a nameless Hungarian chronicler, and entitled The Deeds of the Hungarians. It was written around the year 1200 and has been preserved in a 13th century manuscript.
The text tells of Arpad, who ruled 450 years after Attila. Is Arpad the key to Attila's tomb? To Hungarians, he's the second hero besides Attila. He frees his people from foreign rule and secures the region around the Danube. Before he died in 907, he made a special request.
When the great Prince Arpad died, which was in 907 according to chronicles, it was documented that he wanted to be buried in the city of King Attila, in Civitatem Attilae Regis.
But where is this ancient royal city of Attila? Some think it could be the old Buda, west of Budapest. On medieval maps, the place is called Sicambria, capital of the Hungarians. Was this the city of the kings Arpad and Attila? Sicambria is believed to be lost, but its ruins might be found in the woods of the Pilish Mountains. Just a few kilometers outside Budapest, near the town of Budakalász, everything comes together. Ecologist Imre Lansky has studied the medieval maps and is convinced that the ancient royal city is located in this forest.
I can't put it in any other way. This is the atrium of the castle, and I'll show you where the walls stood. There we can also see the moat.
Imre Lansky is sure that he's standing amidst the ruins of the palace of Hun King Attila.
This rock and this rock.
I'm standing on the wall of Attila's castle. The wall was already here back then.
If Imre Lansky's assumption proves to be true, Attila's tomb might also be somewhere among these trees and rocks.
This was Sicambria. Later it was called Attila's castle. Etzelburg in German.
Attila's life is a source of myths and legends. The once powerful Hun king also inspired European poets. Under the name of King Etzel, he was also featured in the medieval German saga Nibelungenlied. Joachim Heinzler takes a closer look at this myth in the monastery library of St. Gall. He is a Nibelung expert. He thinks the investigation needs to be conducted using the old text.
In Germanic poetry, this Etzel is indeed the name used in literature to refer to Attila the Hun. You can tell by the name. Language historians were able to trace the name Etzel directly back to Attila.
In the Nibelungenlied, Etzel marries Burgundian princess Kriemhild. Etzel is not portrayed as a brutal ruler, but as an old and mild-mannered king. His royal city is called Etzelburg and lies where old Buda used to be.
This old Buda, O Buda, was called Etzelburg in the Middle Ages. We know this as there are records confirming it. And in the Nibelungenlied, the Etzelburg is also referred to as Etzel's residence.
Imre Lansky believes Attila's grave lies in an old quarry directly behind the ruins of the reputed royal city. An excerpt from the Gesta Hungarorum serves as his guiding light.
This book describes that Arpad was buried over the source of a small creek running through the rock. This is why we've come here. I followed the directions in the Gesta Hungarorum. And it is also written that he was buried in a mine. If it hasn't been pillaged, Arpad and Attila have to be there.
The ecologist has observed irregularities in the treetops. Some of the trees have grown in a peculiar way, which could point to a cavity in the ground.
After 8 or 10 meters, the tree or its main branch begins tilting to the side and cannot continue growing straight, so it grows sideways. You can see that perfectly over there. And over there, on the black locust, we can also see the deformation along the whole tree. There's got to be a large cavity underneath us, between here and there.
Infrared imaging also points to a cavity. The cross-section of the area reveals a source of heat. This means there's an air pocket. Lansky has the ground drilled and uses an endoscopic camera. He wants to see if specialists can confirm his suspicion. Are there man-made cavities beneath the rocks?
At about 12 meters down, there's got to be a crack and the edge of a cavity.
The camera probe slowly makes its way through the ground.
How many meters down are we? 10 meters. There you go. Here we are. Slowly, slowly. This is too straight. This stone has been worked. This is a fragmented stone. It is pretty smooth over here too. Go back a bit. And the rock is not the same. This shows that we're looking in the right place.
Imre Lansky has found the cavity.
That's fantastic.
Unbelievable.
Very, very good.
Is this the defining piece of the puzzle in the search for Attila's tomb? Imre Lansky has to be patient and raise money to excavate this site.
If we were lucky enough actually to find the place where Attila the Hun was buried, then, and only then, I think, could we say that he would be no longer a myth.
Attila the Hun, feared and admired to this day. It only seems to be a matter of time until the mystery surrounding his tomb will be revealed.